Okay, next question from Jim.
Jim Utter, Charlotte Observer. Two-part question, Mike. First, given what you've already said, if the 48 car shows up at Talladega with the same exact C-post that they had at Daytona, will your inspectors take them off again?
I hope so.
Okay. And then, second of all, are you, it seems like with John Middlebrook's unwillingness to give any reasoning in his decision as to what exactly, why he reduced them, don't you think it leaves both you and the Hendrick people a little murky as to, you know, saying what exactly he said was right and what exactly he said was wrong? And were you surprised that he didn't offer any kind of reasoning?
When the chief appellate officer is chosen and given the charge of their responsibility, it doesn't include having to explain their decisions. So, you know, if they choose to do that, they do, but they're not obligated to explain their decision.
Would it have helped?
I'll leave that up to you all.
Next question will take us from Bob.
Bob Parker, Scene Daily. Since Millbrook can explain it, do you know, and if you do know, can you tell us why he did rescind the suspension at points, and do you anticipate any changes to your inspection process or how you react in the future?
We do not anticipate any changes to the inspection process. Quite frankly, I think the decision on Tuesday is in support of our inspection process. And again, I go back to the fact that the chief appellate officer is not obligated to explain his whole thought process around making his final decision.
Next question from Lewis.
As Lewis Frank Reuters, can you tell us exactly when in the inspection process they found the non-conforming C-posts? I mean, I think there's been some talk that it didn't. The reason they appealed was that it didn't go through inspection, that they were removed before the usual inspection.
Well, but the terminology you use, the normal inspection, the usual inspection, the inspection process starts as soon as that car comes off the hauler. The templates are part of the inspection process, but the inspection process begins instantly. The car come off the hauler this morning or the first morning in Daytona. So there's a lot of inspection components that don't include templates that could prevent a car from getting to the next phase.
So when was it discovered?
This was discovered, I think, right prior to the templates.
Okay, our next question from Wolfgang, then we'll go to Marty, back over to Reed.
Wolfgang Monser from Germany, Rennsport Press Agency. Two questions. Number one, when you said earlier there's some interpretation in the rule book. In the long-term future, maybe you think it's necessary to rewrite some parts in the rule books and interpretation didn't come up anymore, or some more clear or easier. Number two, how similar are the appealing procedure, because NASCAR has also involvement in the FIA, with the FIA procedure of appealing in Paris. Is there any similarities?
First, or the last question first, is that NASCAR has its own appeal process that's well defined in the rule book, and we've talked about it today, and it may be more unique than either IndyCar or other forms of motorsports, and including the FIA. The second, or the first question you had, the rule book is a work in progress. We've, and many of you that even been around for 2 or 3 years understand that we'll bulletin a rule or we'll modify on the fly if we feel like we need to. We've tried hard more recently to not do that, especially when it comes to changing something that could throw the car owners into a tailspin or something from making a significant change on a part or piece. But the rule book is a work in progress. It will continue to evolve. It has to, for NASCAR to stay relevant in sports and in motorsports and in its own environment, to be sure that we do it correctly. So it will routinely evolve. It is just by nature is going to do that. It's done it for 65 years, and it'll not stop evolving.
Final two questions from Marty and Reed.
Marty Smith, ESPN. Mike, I think other than the hopeful defendants last Tuesday, the general thought was shock and awe that this was the ruling. I don't think anybody gave them a 5% chance of it being overruled. What was your personal reaction when you heard the news?
Well, I'll tell you that I'll keep my personal reaction to myself because I'm the only one that'll ever know it. But I got through that in about 30 seconds to go on to the fact that we did what we felt was correct. Our inspectors did their job. We collectively made a decision on how to react to it. And the car owner has a due process that they can follow, and that due process completes it all. And that's what happened this past week, and we'll go on down the road.
Next, last question from Reed Spencer right here in the front.
Reed Spencer with NASCAR Wire Service. Mike, when John Darby first characterized the infraction at Daytona, he basically said, this is typical to Sonoma, work between the templates, perhaps typical also of the Boyer car at New Hampshire in 2010. Are you concerned that without explanation of why the penalties were overturned, that there might be a perception of different strokes for different folks?
No, first of all, I go back to the fact that some of our penalties were upheld. Okay, so that tells you that the inspection process was correct and there was an issue with the car. The pieces that were not upheld, if there's a way for NASCAR to be more clear, and which is what we learn every time we go through a process, whether the penalties are upheld or they're modified, we learn from the process. If we can, and we should, because we've worked very hard to do this, if we can make it more clear, more understandable, more definitive, to where it's more difficult to disagree with it, then we'll continue to try to do that. But in this case, it came out this way.
But I mean, those particular penalties seem appropriate to the type of infraction that occurred at Sonoma or in New Hampshire. So without explanation, it's sort of tough for us to understand why the points and the suspensions were totally rescinded, whereas in 2010 the suspension was just reduced and the points were not.
What I would tell you is that I think there's 46 cars in the Cup garage and 45 cars in the Nationwide garage. Every one of those cars will be equally scrutinized, but all of them will be very closely scrutinized. That's our job. That's what we're supposed to do. And if one of them doesn't fit right, we'll follow the procedures and the processes that we typically do every weekend. If one of them crosses the line relative to the series director's interpretation of what's right and wrong, then we'll deal with that. We won't change any of our processes or procedures. If, though, along the way, whether specifically to this situation or anyone else that may occur, just like we've done in the past, we will continue to strive to be more definitive and more precise so that the ability to argue about it is lessened.
Thank you for your time, Mike. Thanks, everyone, for your questions. We appreciate it.